FM 90.
Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Radio 1 is broadcasting live from the Central Building here in the heart of our city, Kampala, along the Store Street. We are also live on our website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. On that website, there's an icon with the word Listen Live. You click on that icon, and you're able to listen to us. We are also live on DSTV. Our audio channel there is 897. We are also live on the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google Store of your smartphone. You look for any and download Radio 1 FM 90. As long as you have an internet connection, you should be able to listen to us from anywhere across the globe. Today we'll be looking at the fight against corruption in Uganda. The question we'll be asking, how do we up the fight? Now, there was excitement in some circles almost through the weekend when some information began trickling in, that is in form of letters, that the president had taken steps on two major issues. One, reports that sanctions against the Speaker of Parliament and two former ministers that had come out from the UK. In a letter, President Yoweri Museveni did explain that he had met the High Commissioner, a British High Commissioner in Uganda, and she had actually confirmed to him that indeed the Speaker had property in the UK and a bank account from which she was paying school fees for her children who are also in the UK. That's according to the letter we saw written by the President. And then another letter came in speaking about the Parliamentary Service Award. Now, this letter has been deemed a forgery by State House, and according to the press unit, the President has not written any of such a letter. In that letter, now, I don't know whether to say it was written by who, but it was raising questions on what had transpired, considering the intense debate that took place about the parliamentary exhibition, where apparently the Parliamentary Commission sat down and decided that the commissioners be awarded in their respective capacities. So now we will be looking at this discussion, taking into account the fact that for a long time, campaigners against corruption have questioned the will of the government to fight corruption, despite the government putting in place laws, departments to fight the same, even at the level of State House. I have two gentlemen in studio today to share their views on this issue. Mr. Malon Agaba, Executive Director, Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anderson, for having me this evening, and a very good evening to our listeners.
And Mr. Augustine Otukwa is a Private Secretary to President Yoweri Museveni in charge of political affairs. Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for making time to be with us on this platform.
Good evening, Anderson. Thank you for inviting me yet again to discuss issues of national importance.
My name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. Let me begin with you, Malon. Two letters came out. One has been deemed a forgery, but let me get your response. What was your reaction when you saw these letters coming in on these issues? Maybe we should ignore the other one that has been deemed as a forgery and look at this one on sanctions.
Yeah, of course, the letters were received with a lot of excitement from the public that finally the head of state was taking some action, because prior to that we had a lot of issues that came up concerning Parliament. During the Parliament exhibition, we saw the several cases of unabated really misuse of public resources in terms of members of Parliament and the Speaker and other officials awarding themselves lots of money, the service awards, the per diems, and different issues. And of course the question had been, where is the head of state in this? So there was of course the initial excitement that finally the head of state is taking action. But of course, when you look at things even from history regarding corruption, I think we don't need to be overexcited about the presidential letters, because one, I don't believe that the president, first of all, wasn't aware of what was going on. He says in one of the letters that he had been following the discussion. even if it's not in the letters, he knows because the president is very well informed. So he was aware of what was going on. So maybe the question would be, why is he coming up at this time to write the different agencies, read it, asking them what has happened in all these different scenarios. So basically, there is nothing new and there's no cause of excitement until we see real action happening. And of course, in a way, when you look at the letters that came out, in a way, they're an indictment on the different agencies of government, because he's asking the Attorney General a lot of questions, the Inspector General of Government, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. I think it's an indictment that they have to wait for the head of state to come up and tell them to do their work that they are mandated to do. I think really that is an indictment on those institutions.
All right, we'll come back and dig deeper. Mr. Tuko, you work in the president's office there. Probably you had wind of what was likely to happen, but let's begin from the point that Mr. Marlon Agaba raises. He doubts that the president didn't know about what was going on. So when the president starts writing letters and asking questions and painting this picture that certain things are news to him, very many people get disturbed because they believe, one, the president is the first person to consume intelligence reports here. He reads from the media. A number of times we have seen him in his car reading newspapers, and the things have been in the public domain. Surely you people who work for him, like you who is in charge of political affairs, you must be actually reporting to him and keeping him updated.
Well, thank you, Anderson. Well, I would want to depart from the position my brother Gabal put out that the writing of letters shouldn't excite us. The public has been asking a lot of questions, and these questions have been on a number of things pertaining the level of corruption by office holders, and the public is requiring accountability and it wants answers. As a head of state, you could be right to say he is a consumer of intelligence, but there is too much intelligence information as well that he consumes, right from security, economy, and so many other things. So there is a possibility that some of these things had not gotten into his attention as soon as we would have expected at that time. But indeed, when he got wind, as he stated in his letter, he clearly stated that he received a phone call, and a phone call from the High Commissioner of UK requesting for an urgent meeting, which he granted. And he says when he did not have enough time to have a conversation about the matter. And indeed, when he listened to her, some of the things that came up were of interest to him. And when you read that letter, you actually realize that the revelations that the High Commissioner made to him was a bit of news to him. That's why he was able to task and write back to the respective agencies. Basically, as Agaba says, it may be an indictment, but as a head of state, you are questioning people you have given responsibility. That how can a Ugandan purchase houses as claimed in the UK, and it is not in his attention, because basically he's asking, were you aware as an Attorney General that this matter had happened? Is the IGG aware that these properties had been declared? Was CID aware of some of this information? If there is no fault, and he says, if there is no legal punishment, if it is true that these assets had been acquired and there is no legal punishment, maybe there is need for a political solution into some of these issues. So you realize that he is having a debate within himself. With individuals, he has tasked with the responsibilities to be able to do some of these things, to brief him. And some of these assignments, once you are tasked as an IGG, you do not have to wait until the president directs you to do something. It is upon you to take responsibility to make Augustine account for whatever he has been able to acquire, and probably escalate the brief to the head of state because as is the one that eventually ultimately receives and consumes that kind of information. So I think it is important to appreciate that yes, from the letter we are able to read the mind of the president, that some of these things were not in his attention, and that's why he was very concerned. And when you look at that letter, he's giving options, and once you see an individual giving options, it means he did not have sufficient information relating to what the High Commissioner was able to reveal to him. So I think in my view, the president, just like any other leader of any organization, may skip some information, and eventually it was able to come to him, and probably as we speak now, he could be having sufficient information.
Malone, does that
Yes,
satisfy your earlier stance that you are not excited? You know, you basically didn't believe that the president might be having gaps. Now he has some level of information, and in fact, in that letter, he instructs the Attorney General, he instructs the IGG, he instructs the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
I think in one of the letters there's where he says that he consulted, I think, with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, meaning that he was already aware of these issues in a way. And I really don't want to believe about my brother saying that he could have skipped this information, because this information really, this has been a debate really, and when you look at the exhibition, it was in the mainstream media and several other media outlets. So I really don't believe that he could have missed that out. I really believe, of course, he knew and was waiting for a moment for all this to come out. So really, I still believe that from given history, when you look at so many other scandals that have come up in this country and the way they have ended up, I really don't have so much to be excited about. You have seen previously before the selective prosecution of individuals involved in corruption. We have seen people who have been implicated in corruption and no action being taken. And even by the statements of the president, I think for one of the faults that he's identifying that he calls ideological mistake is of getting the money and investing it abroad in the UK, when Uganda as a country is still struggling. I think that's for him, that's where he sees the biggest fault. And he has said it publicly before, that the IGG should go through on thieves who are stealing and investing in the country. So really, like I said, there's really no need for excitement. The script we are seeing unfold now has unfolded before, and really I don't see anything much coming out of this.
All right. That, Mr. Tukol, let me come to you on this idea of sanctions. You know, sanctions, it has also been a point of discussion where some people are saying, well, we know very well that the UK used its international anti-corruption tool to impose these sanctions. There's been a debate. Some people say the UK should not be interfering in our internal matters. Some people have been actually been arguing, especially within the government, that look, even this so-called corruption scandal of Mabati was actually unearthed by Ugandan systems, and therefore the UK should have waited for the processes in Uganda to be concluded. One, the speaker was never charged, probably meaning that by Ugandan standards there was nothing wrong she did. The ministers were charged, and their trial is still ongoing. Mr. Otuko, you might have had this discussion in the circles of government there, but generally speaking, what's your take on this issue of sanctions?
When you read the statement of the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Uganda, you deduce the fact that the respect for sovereignty is very important. But they also go ahead and say they are going to find time and dialogue and have a constructive engagement with UK being a partner in many of the things that we do as a country. So I think it is important for us to appreciate that, yes, it's important for any foreign country to respect our sovereignty on what we are doing here as a country. But on the other hand, we're also aware that most of our projects that we do as a country, we do partnerships. and we have partnerships with some of these foreign countries like UK, Europe, the European Union. We have projects, for example, in Karamoja that are funded by UK aid, US aid, and the European Union. So Karamoja becomes very strategic interest for the foreign countries that inject money there. So you realize that as we debate the issue of sovereignty, we must be aware about the conditions of our partnerships in the projects that we do together with some of these foreign countries. So the question is, at what point do we feel that our sovereignty has been defiled? I think we should be able to understand that on matters of corruption, if the money involved is involving taxpayers' money, if the projects are run by taxpayers' money, I think it would be important for the foreign countries to give Uganda an opportunity to be able to punish its own leaders that are involved in corruption. But if the projects are being funded by foreign aid, then the discussion may shift from the sovereignty question to dialogue, because if I am a foreign country and I'm investing money in Karamoja, and that is the money being stolen by an Augustine from Uganda, I will be able to question the integrity of Augustine in managing Karamoja projects. Why? Because I'm investing money there. So in such circumstances, the question of sovereignty becomes a discussion that respect our integrity as a country and our sovereignty, but aware of our partnership challenges. So I think that's where the issue. I've listened to the debate, and I think it's important for the foreigners to respect our sovereignty, but in matters where the foreigners are investing money in projects where they have interest, we should be able to ensure that the people we put in running those projects are people of utmost integrity. Now, I think also the other conversation that has brought the issue of sovereignty. Most of the time when we are discussing about corruption, I think of late, when any matter comes about corruption in Parliament, and I think mainly Parliament and maybe the Mabati question, I have listened to people saying they should leave Uganda to have their own sovereignty, because the question of values has come out. People think these sanctions are coming because of homosexuality, and I think I want to disagree and depart from that point. Why? You see, if we are discussing corruption, then we must discuss corruption and find a way of addressing it. We should not use homosexuality as a scapegoat of discussing corruption. I think it would be important that when we are discussing, I remember I came here at one point, we were discussing homosexuality, and we were able to exhaustively give an angle of discussion, and I brought the angle of government, and I believed I defended the position of government in passing homosexuality bill. And later on, when it comes to corruption, I cannot hide to defend corruption using homosexuality. I think there is need for us to draw a line. If we are discussing corruption, let's discuss corruption as a country, so that we are able to find a solution, an amicable solution, that we can be able to use taxpayers' money.
See, those who are talking about the Anti-Homosexuality Act,
yes,
in this regard, in the context of the current sanctions, are saying that, look, there were so many people who were reported to have taken the iron sheets. Iron sheets found themselves in the compound of the vice president, minister of finance. They found themselves in different places. Then they say the speaker was not charged. All of a sudden, the focus is on her, and that's why some people are saying it's because of the lead she took in having the Anti-Homosexuality Act passed. That's what they say.
I will say yes and no. Why? Because you see, when you look at the issue of iron sheets, there has never been anywhere that anybody has been exonerated. We are aware that the two ministers were charged and some other OPM staff. We are also aware that there are some files which are still in the CID, which are not yet complete. How sure are we that some of those files do not involve the speaker?
All right.
So I think it's important for us to accept and say let's differentiate between homosexuality and corruption.
All right. Let me hear from you, Mr. Malon Agaba, on the issue of sanctions, the use of sanctions as a tool of fighting corruption. Does it make sense for other countries to actually look into our issues here?
I think I've heard about the issue of sovereignty several times, but Uganda is part of a global community. We are part of the United Nations, and there is a charter we signed onto. We are part of the Commonwealth, we are part of the African Union, and under the United Nations, for instance, we have the United Nations Convention Against Corruption that puts obligations on Uganda. So there are really global standards that we need, that we have signed onto, and we need to conform to. So we cannot really claim sovereignty when we have signed to these global international frameworks, especially in relation to fighting corruption. Then secondly, I think these sanctions were brought in the spirit that there are forms of corruption, just like human rights, that cannot be tried within a country, because maybe of the caliber of the individuals involved, or because the individuals involved are so powerful, they can circumvent processes. I think that's when the issue of the speaker comes in, because previously the speaker had been named in several of these other scandals, and we are not seeing any action being taken until recently when the president is asking for information. But also when you look previously with the Magnitsky sanctions, you saw the individuals involved like General Kale Kayihura, for instance, and Abel Kandiho. Several of them couldn't be tried when they are in office because of the power they wielded. So sanctions are there in this case really to look at the political corruption and individuals that cannot be held accountable within the systems that they are in because of the power and the resources they wield. So I think given that really we shouldn't be really advancing sovereignty as an issue. And what they're saying that the assets you have in our jurisdiction, we are freezing them. They have a right to. Even Uganda can freeze assets of any individuals. And I've seen scenarios where Uganda, for instance, has deported foreigners and declared them persona non grata, including international journalists. They have been bad. So the UK is saying that we can use our systems based on information we have, because they have embassies, they have their own intelligence gathering systems. They don't need somebody to first be indicted and taken before a court for them to have information and make conclusion on who they should sanction and who they shouldn't. They really have mechanisms of getting that. So really, I think the point of sovereignty doesn't really come up. I think we really need to look at the merits of the issues that are coming up and address those merits. And again, like I said, we are part of a global community. We cannot run away and start hiding in sovereignty when there are global standards that actually can be used to hold officials accountable. And for me as an individual, I really welcome these sanctions, because you are looking at the effectiveness of sanctions. When you're looking at the discussion and the discomfort, I think that in a way also helps when you look at the impunity up there amongst individuals who think that they are untouchable.
When you talk about that Uganda can also freeze assets and things like that, I get it. I don't think that's possible, because the last time we had a discussion about anti-corruption mechanisms in Uganda, we didn't have a robust law that actually recovers proceeds of corruption. We don't have that framework. How is it possible for us actually to use sanctions when we can't even recover from those that have stolen from us here internally?
There are two things.
Do we have a law?
There are two things there, Anderson. One is that you have seen the Financial Intelligence Authority freezing bank accounts, for instance, of non-government organizations. Some of this money comes from donors abroad. You have seen the government banning the Democratic Governance Facility from doing any work in the country. So that type of sovereignty, Uganda can freeze resources within its jurisdiction, including freezing of bank accounts. That can happen. When it comes on the issue of recovery of assets of proceeds of crime, yes, true, we don't have a comprehensive legal framework on that, but still there are a few aspects within the law, especially the Anti-Corruption Act, where through an order of the High Court, assets can be frozen temporarily, like for 6 months, as investigations are ongoing. Although I agree with you broadly that we don't have a comprehensive framework for tracing, freezing, and managing and disposal of assets or proceeds of crime.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Keep your comments coming on WhatsApp line, which is 0703-090-090. I can already see some comments coming in. Pat, thank you for your comment. I'll be reading it out for the gentleman in studio to actually respond. When we return, we'll be looking at how we can up the game here locally to actually be able to effectively fight corruption, which according to the IGG takes away from us annually 10 trillion shillings. That's almost 1/4 of our budget, which is very critical as far as provision of services is concerned. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum continues after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at the fight against corruption in Uganda. The question we're asking, how do we up the game? How do we do it better? We are seeing other countries now intervening in to actually help us by use of sanctions. The UK did issue sanctions the other day. We also know the United States government has also issued sanctions through the Magnitsky mechanism, and that not only entails issues to do with funds, but also issues around human rights violations in this particular country. I'm speaking to Mr. Augustine Otuko, Private Secretary to President Yoweri Museveni in charge of political affairs, and Mr. Malon Agaba, Executive Director and Corruption Coalition Uganda. Now, gentlemen, we all do understand that corruption is a very big problem in our country, not only in the government, but also within the private sector. But we also know that the private sector in Uganda is somehow connected with the public sector, because the public sector is the biggest consumer of services from the private sector, public sector. Looking at the amount of money that is spent actually from the budget in terms of procurement, over 60%. We are told by the IGG 10 trillion shillings is lost annually, and I think the IGG has an idea how these resources are actually lost. So the question is, how do we up our game to be able to deal with this menace? Because 10 trillion shillings, if put to proper use, even in 5 years, this country will be greatly transformed.
Well, thank you. Maybe before I answer that,
and even before you answer that, in that particular regard, people have talked about the lack of political will. President Yoweri Museveni has been setting up units, State House Anti-Corruption Unit, Investors Protection Unit, we have the IGG, we have so many groups out there, but still, this problem persists.
By setting up all those units in itself is political will to address. The issue now is we should be able to do diagnosis to find out where the exact problem is. If we have established all these units and corruption is still escalating, that means there is a problem somewhere. I saw recently somebody accusing IGG office as part of those that are corrupt. So we should be able to get deeper into understanding that after setting up this institution, which is in itself a political will from the head of state, there is need for us to understand the political dynamics, the work dynamics within these specific institutions, their willingness, the quality of human resource deployed in those places, to be able to appreciate and be able to get better results. So I think the political will is there, but there is something beyond political will that we must be able to understand as a country. And this is not just about NRM. I've always told, I think it was on this very radio where I said that we did research, about 4 or 5 years ago on municipalities led by opposition parties in Uganda. And we realized that the same problem we are grappling with within NRM in terms of the corruption challenges by the leaders elected by NRM structures is the same problem that we are experiencing in most of these cities and municipalities that are led by opposition. Because ideally we wanted to understand, is there something better that opposition is doing so that NRM can be able to up its game and we realize that this may not necessarily be an NRM problem. It is a problem for the country, and we should be able to go back on drawing board as a country to appreciate this matter. On the other issue of sanctions, I think what the public needs to know, I needed to clarify this. When the news came, we were told that by the news reported by online and other and print media, we were told that the speaker was sanctioned and the two ministers on Mabati. But later on, when the president issued this letter, when this letter that was leaked came out, we discovered that there were things beyond just the Mabati. The president was talking about bank accounts that are established in the UK. The president was also talking about the issue of owning property. And his concern now was about if these houses exist, then when you try to interpret that letter, you actually discover that for him, he says, if these houses are acquired illegally, then he has no problem with the sanctions, because that's what the letter basically is saying. Because by the time he's questioning the IGG, he's questioning he's directing the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he's questioning directing and questioning the Attorney General. Basically, he's trying to say, if these things are illegal, then we must be able to find a way of dealing with it locally, using the local. Meaning, the sanctions have helped us to discover things that maybe we wouldn't have discovered if the sanctions had not come. So I think there is need to appreciate that the sanctions were beyond just Mabati. The
Mabati was a trigger. It was the
yes,
reason.
Yes. But you can actually discover that there are bigger details beyond Mabati that triggered these sanctions.
All right,
yeah.
Mr.
But what was reported was that it was Mabati. So on the issue of what do we do, how do we up our game? I think as NRM we must take responsibility that there is something that we are not doing right as a political party. When you check NRM 1986, 1996, there was this program that was called Chakam Chaka. It raised cadres. They were not highly educated, but these are people who were taken through orientation, ideological orientation. Of course, the Western world, the World Bank and IMF pushed us to abandon this program. But this program raised consciousness of the population to demand for accountability, to take responsibility, to be accountable, and to be patriotic. And that is why you realize that the level of corruption in the first 10 years of NRM was a bit minimal, because the quality of human resources raised through a mass ideological program.
That was the time when we were under the movement system.
No, but basically
largely
yes,
that part.
As a
So
political party,
when we went partisan,
yes, but
when we went partisan, your real color came out.
But you see, it's not that our real color came out, because it is the same system that is running. We translated into multipartism, but it is NRM that is running government. So the point I'm making is that we have countries that have been able, the quality of human resource. In brief, I'm talking about the quality of human resource. You have a population that does not understand its responsibility to hold leaders accountable. You have leaders that do not know that they are supposed to be accountable to their people.
The population understands.
And the point I'm making is that we must be able to go back to basics as NRM.
Here is the problem.
To raise the consciousness of the people to be able to help us to fight corruption.
Here is the problem. The population somehow seems to understand, and some of them have tried to be proactive. When you look at initiatives like the parliamentary exhibition, when you hear some people are actually standing up and calling out some names, unfortunately, they are being arrested. They are being arrested and threatened.
You see the point. When I say, I agree with you. I agree there is some part of elite community in Uganda, because when you go to exhibition, you're going to find elites.
All right.
The semi-elites and the elites are the ones on social media. But the point I'm making is that does the mass population understand that leaders are supposed to be accountable? I'll give you an example. Every time there is a leader that is being asked to account,
how will they understand when you budget nothing for civic education under the Uganda?
No, you see the point I'm making is that we have what we call the national youth program in most of these countries that are doing. Israel is doing it, the US is doing it, and so many other countries. But we were asked to abandon this program. The point I'm making is that we can do better by raising a patriotic society that is very conscious about its responsibilities. That's the point I'm making.
All right, let's hear from...
Because at the moment, as we speak, the population has tribalized politics and corruption. Do you know why?
And corruption has
they have
also
they have tribalized corruption.
Because,
yes, the point I'm making is that we have tribalized corruption. Today, if we asked a leader to account, I'll give you an example. When the Mabati issue came, we saw the cultural leaders of Bugisu, because the two ministers involved were from Bugisu. The cultural leaders, the religious leaders, the political leaders making statements, leave our daughters. So the point is that we must go back to the basics to raise the correct consciousness of our people so that we can be able to appreciate that leaders are supposed to be accountable.
Malon, how do we up our game? Or what is the missing, what are the missing issues, the missing ingredients that we need actually to put on board to be able to deal with this menace of corruption?
Yeah, Anderson, there is a very close relationship between politics and corruption in this country. The two actually are like Siamese twins conjoined at birth. Because when you look at the level, first of all, of commercialization of the politics of this country and the amounts of money being put in politics as part of the problem. But also when you talked about the aspect of political will and the lack of it, when you look at the statements, for instance, made by the head of state that thieves who steal and invest in the country, they should be allowed to steal and invest here. And we have heard, for instance, the former IGG told us that thieves, when pursued, they hide behind the president. And there are so many other reports by Human Rights Watch that have really chronicled the lack of political will to address some forms of corruption, especially those involving high-ranking political officials. So, and really, we need to start with our politics, because we are in a country where, of course, leaders wield a lot of power. We have seen the president is writing letters, and agencies are finally acting because of the power that office wields. So one, I think the political will hasn't been there fully to address the problem of corruption. And because of that will, it has trickled down to corruption really going in all sections of society and becoming a culture. Now corruption, we're talking about the 10 trillion. It's a culture that even an LC1 will sell you a stamp which should be free. Some of them will ask for 10% to sign for you on transfer documents. The police officer will also want to use their office to get money. The lands officer, it has become a culture.
There's a budget expert who was in this studio one time who actually said we are even now budgeting for corruption.
Exactly. Like members of parliament gave themselves 100 million. It was planned, budgeted, appropriated, and disbursed to them. That's why we've reached. So it has become normalized, and I think really to address this, we really need efforts. But like I said, we really need to address the question of political will to fight corruption at all levels without favor. I think we need to address that.
When you talk about political will, what would you want to see?
Political will, one...
Because Otuko says the political will can be reflected in having institutions placed to the level of State House, where the president has put units to swiftly deal with the corrupt.
One is the element of the statements. Like when you look at the statement I've just spoken about, it emboldens thieves. If you say that thieves can still invest here, it really emboldens them. The statements, to the actions should pick the statements. If you are saying that the government has a zero tolerance to corruption policy, why do you have 22 people involved in stealing iron sheets and only 3 go to court? Address the issue of what? Of the action as well. 3, we have the different institutions, but have we addressed the challenges affecting these institutions? If it is funding, address the funding. If it is autonomy, address the autonomy, than creating parallel institutions, because they don't solve the problem. So really, the issue of political will is there. We have even made suggestions. Like when you talked about asset recovery, the government had started on the proceeds of crime bill, which was looking at recovering proceeds of corruption, including, by the way, non-conviction based. That if a public official has assets that they cannot justifiably show how they acquired them, the state is at liberty to seize them. But the politicians refused to pass that. So really, you cannot do away with the whole issue of political will. That's where we should start, and then the other things will fall into place. He gave an example of a period where we had this corruption when the NIM had just come to power. It's because the politics then and the leadership then were committed, and it was part of their 10 points program.
And you're saying
I don't know where that is right now, but that level of will is not existent today.
All right, we have comments coming in from the dear listeners who have been following this discussion, and now they are contributing to it. I'll begin with a comment from Pat. Pat Ricina says, Anderson on Radio 1, thank you for this Spectrum program. It really always tackles topical issues. First of all, our country is in a situation of state of capture. The highest form of corruption, meaning one or just a handful of people make major state decisions. One ray of hope is that one person alone or with close allies can stop corruption if they so wished. Many Gulf states have tried using their monarchs, or Gabriel Rawlings of Ghana, when he first captured power, tried. So our president is the only one who can stop corruption. But can he, at this point, in 4 decades of reign, without risking loss of power, can he do that? That's a question from Pat. Then somebody is writing, Kenneth, I totally support sanctions or any other penalties against anyone who is corrupt. In the case of the Speaker, the real reason behind the UK sanctions is her stand in favor of the anti-LGBTQ law. There are so many individuals who were involved in Mabati corruption, but why did they select only the Speaker and 2 others? Just to hoodwink the public that it is not about LGBTQ. There have been grand corruption cases in Uganda, and the UK had never imposed such sanctions. This is because LGBTQ is at the core of their values. But then we have another comment. Good evening, Kenneth. This is Kanene Johnson in Thronko. I think it's unfair to talk about fighting corruption in Uganda yet. In Uganda, corruption is fought on regional basis. It's clear that many people who were involved in the Mabati saga were many, but only Bugisu ministers were seen as the corrupt, covering the others. They thought, covering the others, they included Mary Goretti and Honorable Agnes Nandut. He thinks that why did they only focus on the 2? Wherever I see homosexuality being mixed up with corruption, by even land people, I wonder how people think. If it is homosexuality, why didn't they sanction Asumani Basalirwa, the person behind the bill, or sanction the president who assented to it? That is George in Iganga. We have another comment. Lawrence from Entebbe. All those saying Uganda should be left to handle its issues live in a fantasy world. Any uncorrupt Ugandan should be happy with the sanctions. Only small fish in Uganda get punished for corruption. I hope many more countries sanction the Speaker in due course. That's a comment there. Good evening, Spectrum. This issue of sanctioning the speaker over such a small theft is rather hypocritical by the whole UK. There's big league corruption in UK with proceeds from Russian oligarchs keeping their money there. This lady picked a little loot for the East to also benefit from the windfall. Well, this one has again convicted the Speaker before she's even tried. Out of the 10 trillion lost to corruption, about 30% goes to anti-corruption agencies like IGG, etc. It is necessary to fight corruption from the fighters, otherwise we are just flogging a dead horse. Then we also have another comment. Do you realize that the majority of Ugandans are questioning the authenticity of the letters, but not the magnitude of the contents? Kampala Woman MP Honorable Malembe once highlighted that procedures for service grants were illegal. Let's check that out, maybe. That's a comment coming in from Tony Kent, who is listening in from Mawanda Road. There we have it. The comments coming in from the listeners. Malon.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think I'll respond to 1 or 2. There's part who say that the president is the only one who can stop corruption. Of course, he's not the only one who can stop corruption, but he can have a very big impact, because if he has just issued a few letters now, and we see, I was reading in the papers today that the report by the IGG is ready. And remember, during the exhibition, the IGG was asked to investigate corruption at Parliament, and she said that she couldn't because another institution was working on that. But you're already seeing action being taken. So can you just imagine the amount of impact we would have if the president was taking such actions and taking them on all cases, not on selected cases? I think that in a way would help. I really want to agree with my brother that we need to address issues of corruption and disassociate them from the Anti-Homosexuality Act, because one, like you said, there were so many actors involved in the Anti-Homosexuality Act, including the proposer of the bill, including the members of parliament that supported it, including the religious leaders that demanded for the act to be enacted. So I really wouldn't want really to tag that, to tag the whole sanctions to the Anti-Homosexuality Act. I would want us to look at the merits of the issues being raised, but also when you look at the caliber of the person, especially the speaker, it is not just about the Mabati. There have been several other scandals, like the exhibition showed, that could have provided a basis for that to happen.
Right, Mr. Tuko.
Well, I want to begin with my brother from Bugisu and the person who said the speaker stole little for Easterners. You see, this is what the problem is exactly. That if I am from Teso, I must support my representative in the corruption. As if I have an interest who is involved in corruption, I should therefore protect that person. But this person is stealing as an individual. The Mabati saga was directly under Dr. Chitutu, who comes from Busoga, and I mean Bugisu, and our friend Nandutu. They were directly responsible. So the first responsibility to account before you even look at any other person, it is the technical people who worked with them directly and the minister who was directly in charge of this. Because even the budget which they presented, the additional budget which was passed by cabinet, it was presented by Dr. Chitutu. So she was fully aware that this money was meant to purchase iron sheets meant for Karamoja. So when matters went bad, the first person who should have provided the answers to us, to Ugandans, was the person who was responsible. So I think we should reduce tribalizing corruption. This is the point I'm making. That unless we stop tribalizing the theft of public funds, then we can be able to get solutions to corruption. Because when somebody in Sironko says, why did they, our own were convicted, were being tried, while others are not? Yes, you may partially have a point, but it is your own who was responsible at that time. So I think it is important to appreciate that. Then there is a story I always tell my friends. While I was at university in Mobs, there was somebody from Teso who was accused of corruption. And I was a leader of the Teso Students Association. I was the chairman. So when the person was accused in anti-corruption court, the MP, one of the MPs at that time, came to the university to meet us. To mobilize us as students. And they wanted me as a chair to mobilize as many TESO students as possible, and I should be able to reach out to other TESO students in the universities. Probably that person was Kampala, your patron. Within Kampala, and they wanted us to march with the placards before the court, and I refused. And I said, when this person was stealing, he was stealing as an individual. He was not stealing for TESO people. Now that he has been caught, he becomes a TESO property. He becomes a part of the entire Teso tribe. So I think unless as a population we remove tribalizing corruption, then we can be able to get answers. Well, I want to agree that there is need, as Agaba said, there is need for us to look at corruption independently. If the sanctions are coming through corruption, can we look at it and say and be able to derive merit, as he says? Is there value in what the sanctioners are stating, or they are basically blackmailing our speaker because of maybe homosexuality? But we should be able to first look at corruption independently, look at the merits involved in these sanctions in line with corruption. If the sanctions are coming on the basis of homosexuality, then we should also be able to look at it in that angle.
All right.
But for
one
now,
last comment.
But for now, I think what is important as a country is to appreciate that there is a bigger problem, and this problem is not necessarily an NRM problem. It is not necessarily an opposition problem. It is a Ugandan problem that must involve all colors, all political colors, to be able to go back on the drawing board. We have had accusations of MPs receiving bribes in opposition. We have also seen accusations of corruption in opposition political parties. So I think it is important for us as a country to have a reflection and be able to look at how best to answer the question of corruption.
Last comment this evening, Alan from Ntungamo writes in and says, Anderson, thank you for the topic. Make no mistake to believe that Mr. Museveni and his NRM outfit can fight corruption. No way. NRM itself is corruption enterprise and a product of corruption. Right from 2001, NRM has been irregularly winning elections. Vote rigging and brutality of the opposition loyalists has always been the order of the day. Mr. Museveni himself corrupted MPs to deal with unpopular constitutional amendments like removal of age limit. Classified budgets are conduit of corruption for State House. Shielding of the corrupt from prosecution by the state is the worst form of office abuse. Life presidency is another driver of corruption in Uganda. The entire corruption cycle revolves around NRM and the top state actors. That's Alan from Ntungam. Very quickly, would you like to respond to that before I bring in
Well, we need a day to debate with Alan on a number of things. I'm aware that in Ntungamo municipality, Karuhanga won elections twice. And I am not sure whether he rigged the elections. He was an opposition person at that time.
All right.
So I am not very sure. So we can
Malone,
debate with
your
Alan
parting
when
shot.
we find time.
All right, your parting shot, Alan. Malone.
Yeah, I think I agree with Lawrence, who said that several other countries should sanction individuals. I think I like the individual sanctions because of the panic and the discomfort they bring, and because they are really helping us, touching the people who thought that we are untouchable in this country.
All right.
Yes. So I really welcome the sanctions, and I agree really with my brother here that we need to go back to the drawing board and see how we can really address this problem called corruption.
All right, with that, we come to the end of Spectrum. Thank you very much, Mr. Malon Agaba and Mr. Augustine Otuko for joining us this evening. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for sending in your thoughts. You helped us to shape the discussion here in studio. I've been your host, Kenneth Lukwago Anderson. Up next, News in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, the Soul Train with BB Junior.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.